from CFP, episode 83. If you're curious, that's downtown Excelsior, Minnesota, our hometown here, just west of the cities, about 20 minutes-ish west of Minneapolis. Today we're talking about debt repayment and why you may want to consider paying off some of your debts in 2025. We've turned the corner. We're through January. We're into February. We're getting closer to spring. Yeah, maybe not in Minnesota, but we're getting closer to spring. And it's time to get serious about paying off some debts and some strategies how to do so. That's what we're going to talk about today on episode 83. Let's dive in. Okay, so what we have in front of us here is a little debt repayment spreadsheet that I have kind of put together over the years. Nothing too fancy, but just shows a couple different strategies. So what we're going to talk about are 3 different ways to pay off your debt. A, just keep making your minimum payments. B, something called the avalanche strategy. And C, something called the snowball strategy, where you basically take extra payments, apply them in a certain order based on a priority, and then you pay off your debts in a certain time frame, either shorter or longer. So let's make a couple assumptions. Number one, we're going to have to start off with the assumption that today's date is, what we'll go with today's date is 2/6/25. And we're going to assume we have 3 credit cards to pay off. We have a Visa card, a MasterCard, and American Express account. $5,000, $3,000, and $2,000 respectively, at the various rates you see there, 18, 15, and 12%. Now we have to assume what the minimum payments are. They're usually between 2 and 4%, depending on, the company and the balance and the rate and such. I'm going to cut it right down the middle and say that the payment is 3%. So it's kind of halfway between the two, between 2 and 4. We'll just cut it right down the middle and say the minimum payment on each of these is 3%. So we have $10,000 of credit card debt. We have a total of $150, $90, and $60 for a total of $300 minimum payments, respectively, between all 3 of them. So that's the first assumption we have to make, and that's what I'm assuming when I look at these different strategies. So we're going to look at 3 different strategies to pay off the debt. Number 1, we'll make minimum payments. Number 2, we'll do what's called the avalanche strategy, and number 3, we'll do the snowball strategy, which I'll explain what those mean as we go. All right, we'll start off with an easy one. You make your minimum payments, and that's basically it. So I've assumed, again, that there's a 3% of the value of the credit card, of the balance, 3% minimum payment on each one of these cards. So that's $150, $90, and $60 respectively, right? That's $300 in payments. We're not going to assume anything extra being paid toward the balance. That's what this is here. That's why there's nothing in that cell. And I've got a couple different strategies I can assume on this. Again, we're just going to assume no, what they call no snowball effect, or no extra payments made. We'll get to that in a second. Now, if you're like me and you need to see a schedule of this to make it stick, what I've done here is we've listed the cards. Here's the total interest paid. If you did this strategy, you would have this paid off in about 47 months. Just round up, and near as makes no difference. It's 4 years, 48 months. On a schedule, it kind of looks like this. We've got this sheet built out so we can show schedule. I'll get there eventually. Here we go. So right here, there's the credit card balances you see there. There's the rates. And you have a schedule here that goes all the way down to the 47th month, where you're making your final $84-ish payment, and your credit cards are officially paid off. Now, over that time, you've paid about $3,334, near as makes no difference, in interest on these cards. Now, the question is, beyond making the minimum payment, what could you do to pay this off? And is there any, kind of mathematical tricks or maybe strategies you could use to pay this off a little bit sooner? Because I will say in the coming year or two, I think we might be stuck with interest rates at a higher level than we originally thought, given the environment that we're in. It's just a feeling I have. I don't see rates going down anytime soon, given what's going on in the world, and all roads lead to higher rates, I think, at this point. So if you have variable rate credit cards, it's really important you get these things paid off maybe in the next year or two. So we're going to look at the first strategy to pay this off as I go back to my other sheet here. And it's called the snowball strategy, and we'll dive into that right now. Okay, next, let's do what's called the snowball strategy. Okay, now in order to do this, we have to make an assumption. Now, most people I see who have debt, they could pay it off faster, but they just don't want to. Maybe they're putting some money into savings, or they're afraid to put extra money toward the debt because it means they can't save as much. But they're obviously not realizing how much interest they're paying on these debts by leaving them there and just making minimum. So let's assume rather than paying $300 per month, and this is a very common thing, is probably a realistic assumption, the person could afford to, let's say, make $500 a month of payments toward their debt. So we're going to assume their total monthly payment could be $500, right? So we're assuming the person is making $300 toward the minimums, but they could make $500 if they wanted to. This is a very common scenario. You usually can pay more toward your debt if you kind of buckle down and just decide to do it. So we're going to assume that extra $200, so the difference between what they could pay and what they are paying now, the minimums, that extra $200 has to be allocated somewhere. So the question is, how do we allocate that extra $200? How do we decide where it goes? Do we pay the highest interest rate cards first? Do we pay the lowest debt balance first off to feel like we're getting somewhere? What's the actual better strategy in this case? Now, if we assume a snowball strategy, which is the lowest balance first, we'll assume that. So it reordered our payoffs here. If you do that, now obviously in the minimums, we were paying what it was something like $3,334 in interest total. We can cut that from $3,334 down to about $1,806. Okay, so $1,806. If you need to see it in a schedule, again, here it is. Make that a little bigger so you can see it. So we see here $1,800 of total interest paid, and it's paid off. Instead of 48 months, you've cut it in half down to 24. So just by increasing your $200 or your $300 minimum payments to $500 total payments, then taking the extra $200 and deciding where it goes, that would be your schedule right there. Okay, so there's a schedule. It goes, $260, $90, and $150, and it kind of breaks down from there. You finally make your $300 payment down to the Visa card back in the 24th month, it looks like. So that is the snowball strategy. The snowball strategy is simply where you take the difference here and you apply it to the lowest balance card first. Not the highest interest rate, but the lowest balance, which in this case was the Amex card. So the minimums are paid, the extra $200 gets allocated between the cards in a certain fashion, and there's the chart as far as interest due, that red line, and the amount of snowball, the growth on what's being paid off over time. So that's the snowball method, very common way of paying off debt, which is, of course, lowest balance first, not highest interest rate first. Now let's do the avalanche method. We'll take a look at that. All right, next one. This one we'll do the avalanche method, all right? So again, we're going to assume we've got our cards here as we had before, balanced as of today. $10,000, $300 minimum payments. Again, let's assume that we can make a $500 total payment toward our debt, which of course includes the minimums, but a $200 extra amount per month. Now, instead of the snowball method, which is your lowest balance first, we're going to do the avalanche method, which is your highest interest rate first. All right, so what mathematically works out better? In this particular case, now the months to pay off is still 24, but the total interest paid is a little bit less. It's about $1,615 versus 18 and change, or the minimums, which is the worst. There is your interest due chart and your growth of the payoff over time. And there's your $1,615 total interest paid with a schedule of all your cards. There's the extra $200, right, going toward the cards, but it's being allocated in such a way to reflect the highest interest rate first. Okay, so the Visa was our higher interest rate. So there's your result when it comes to the avalanche method. So we looked at the minimums, we looked at the snowball method, and we looked at the avalanche method. In this case, the avalanche method works for us best. Now, it might be different. In some cases, it could be different where the lowest balance card has the highest interest rate card, or vice versa. It might work. You have to play with this. Now, if this is a spreadsheet that you might want, I'm going to put my email below here. Reach out to me if you want this. We're not going to charge you for it. If you want this sheet, you want to play with it a little bit, you have some debts you want to pay off, you want to run some scenarios for yourself, email me. We'll send it off to you. There's nothing proprietary here. It's basically just a spreadsheet, and we'll give it to you for nothing if you want it. So reach out to me if you want this. But there's different ways to pay off your debt. Now, if you go back to the beginning, and obviously let's assume what we have here in front of us is just the same balance start date, same credit card, same rate, same minimum payment, everything. Is it more valuable, let's say, and I've had this question before, is it more valuable to make a one-time payment at the beginning and then have your snowball or avalanche strategy ongoing? Well, let's say you did that, right? And you made an additional payment in the very first month of, maybe you had some extra money laying around you didn't need it, an extra $500 or an extra $1,000, a one-time payment in addition to an avalanche or snowball strategy. Well, let's say you had $1,000. That would cut your debt repayment down to about 21 months if you were using, in this case, I think it was the avalanche, correct? Were we using an avalanche this one? think we were. Yeah, avalanche. So under the avalanche strategy in this particular scenario, and you you also threw an extra 1,000 toward the debt right in the beginning. That cuts your interest down even further to 1,273, and there's your payoff schedule right there and how those payments would be allocated toward the various cards. So it's better usually to throw that extra payment if you have one in the beginning if you can, just because there's compounding effects for you that benefit you. If you throw it in late, maybe down here somewhere, doesn't quite reduce your interest as much as you would think, and your payment schedule is still around 21. So if you're going to make an extra payment, as far as an extra principal payment that doesn't go toward anything, just but principal, you're better off doing that in the beginning because there's some compound effects in your favor. So that was the 3-week card. Minimum payments, pretty much always bad. Avalanche strategy, snowball strategy, depends on what your debt situation is and how the rate balances and the credit card rates fall and where they lie. But you can use the sheet. If you like it, reach out to me. It's a very helpful tool, and we can get it to you for nothing. There is nothing proprietary here. We'll send it off to you for free. So that's it. That's Debt Repayment 101 right there. It does matter what balances you have on each card and what the rates are. Sometimes the snowball strategy might work better. Sometimes the avalanche might work better. But if you're going to use a one-time payoff, you're better off doing it earlier than later because you will typically pay less interest. And in combination with that, the avalanche strategy works pretty well if you're factoring in one-time payments maybe here or there. Again, if you want that spreadsheet, reach out to me. I'll put my contact info somewhere here. We'll figure it out. In the interim, hey, thank you for spending your time with me. It is your most valuable asset. I'm cheering for you. 2025, get your finances in order, pay off your debts. We might have higher rates longer than you think. So credit card rates might be going up in the future, or they might stay where they are. But either way, let's get that debt repaid off. And again, if you want that sheet, let me know. Take care, and thanks for watching the video. Bye.